Today, on Energy Contact, if I asked you to draw me a picture of electricity, you wouldn't be able to do it because electricity is invisible, although it's very real. Physicists draw models and representations, but that's about as close as they can hope to get. Well, today we're going to look at chakras, but chakras are invisible too. So we're about to do what scientists and sorcerers both do. We're going to take a look at that which cannot be seen. And that's what's coming up before your very eyes right now on Energy Contact.
I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping and doubt. Keep my mind on better things. I ain't gonna worry and I ain't gonna complain. I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping and doubt. Keep my mind on better things. Just keep my mind on better things.
Hello, and welcome to Energy Contact. My name is Joseph Willenbrink. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the production staff here in the studio for helping me get my message out to you. Energy Contact is a series that I'm presenting to you as a public service. It's about attaining perfect health, growth, self-improvement, happiness, and realizing your full potential. It's designed to present you a new way of seeing yourself and a new way of seeing the world around you. We're talking about things that have to do with making an energetic contact with yourself internally and with your environment. There's no difference between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, the ego. There's no difference between mass and energy. They're all exactly the same. Goodness, there is something about us that loves to categorize and classify, separate these things out, put them each in their own little separate compartments. But all that health and growth and self-improvement we're talking about actually take place when we do just the opposite. It happens when we put these things together, when we make an energetic contact between the physical world and the unseen one. We're presenting on these programs a brand new paradigm that is thousands of years old. We're presenting extraordinary topics for ordinary people. And let's move right ahead with that. Let's bring up our first slide. Everyone please know that I am not a doctor. This show is not a medical show, it's not a medical advice show, it's not a medical talk show, not a medical anything show. Couldn't be further from it. Now I might call myself an energy healer or a chakra healer, so might you, so might a lot of other people. But state, federal, and local governments absolutely do not. They call me no such thing at all, and it's very important to understand that. There's lots of important stuff on your screen right now. Please give your full attention to that. Look at all of that if you would. But when you've got it down, now would be a great time to locate a pencil and paper. Now here's why you want to do that. At the end of this program, we are going to run some credits, and on those credits there's going to be contact information for me. Now I invite and encourage you to contact me. I hope you will. I sort of hope that something that I have to tell you today will inspire you to want to do that. But in order to contact me, you're going to need that contact information. In order to get that, you're going to need a pencil and paper. Now there'll be plenty of time to jot that stuff down when the credits roll if you've got your pencil and paper ready. So please locate that now. All right, let's come back up here. Today's show is show number 65. And if you're tuning in for the first time today, well thanks and welcome. You'll enjoy the show, I think. These shows are sequential, they build. So we're talking about things today that we've defined and explained on previous shows. There's some ramp up stuff, some up to speed things you will have missed out on. However, I do my very best to make sure that every show has a lot of value on a standalone basis. And today's show truly does. If it is your first time joining, one of your first times, and what you see piques your interest though, please look around because there will be earlier shows airing. They'll either be re-airing right here on this station or they'll be on at different days and different times in different areas. And if you look for them, I'll appreciate it. All right, and now we've come to the part of the show where I get to introduce my co-host to you. Let's get Slim on camera. This is my buddy Slim here, and Slim is here for a reason. Since we're investigating what the energy contacts in the physical self, we have to understand a few things, don't we? We have to understand something about energy, and this show is certainly about energy. But all that energy out in outer space somewhere does us no good at all. It does us no good until we bring it into focus, bring it into contact with something. Slim is here to show us that thing that the energy contacts. Remember, a body without energy is just a corpse. And energy without a body, well, it might be a number of cool things, but none of them are human. All right, previously on Energy Contact, we have been looking at what is real and what is unreal. And we've seen that it has absolutely nothing to do with what is visible and what is invisible. Einstein has shown us, in fact, that the you on a home video somebody took of you, the you on a projector, like an old Super 8 movie projection screen, you in a photograph, things like that, there's no real mass, no more real mass in any of those than there is in this you that you call you. So we know that there exist invisible things. Electricity, radio waves, cell phone signals, love, peace, anger, happiness, goodness, the list is endless. And so whatever we are, we've seen that invisible energy needs to flow through us. It flows through pipes in us, just like blood or nerve signals or anything else flows through their respective channels. We are alive as long as we can promote the flow of invisible energy through our physical self. And at the moment we can no longer do that, when that invisible something leaves us, we die. All right, so the regulator of all those flows, the regulator of all those openings and closings, well, that's the mind. That's what we've seen on Energy Contact, and that mind pervades every cell of your body. Every cell in you has intelligence. And the subconscious mind then? Well, that's the body intellect. Those same materials, we've always heard they were brain things, those things that give us thought, memory, reason, recall, logic, intellect, intelligence. All those things are in fact in every cell of our body. They permeate, they saturate every cell of our body. And so physically, we are built, we're manufactured by our own mind and by our own body intellect. Now the mind tends to take the shape and form of whatever it is upon which it is focused. And so people who focus on better things feel better. We've always sort of known instinctively that happy people are healthy more often than depressed people are, than angry people are. And if you've been watching Energy Contact for the past few weeks, you know why. We've begun to see ourselves in a new way, in a much more accurate way, the way that Einstein saw us, as beings without any real physical structure to speak of at all. Not as a physical creature that happens to have a little energy, but as an energy creature that happens to have a body. It's almost a side fact. In fact, it's the physical part that's the unreal part. It's a hologram of sorts of that invisible, much more real energetic world. This physical stuff, it's an optical illusion. It's the energetic world of wavelengths and flows and frequencies. That's all that's real. That frozen steam that Einstein explained so clearly. And yet most people, including people who use Einstein's theories, people who teach Einstein's theories, they're either unable or unwilling to consider. Now, in our energetic self, the main current, the main lifeline of energy, the energy conduit for this energy, is something called the Sushumna Nadi. We've looked at that over the past few shows. And there are these things called chakras on that either promote or crimp off the flow of this energy. It's the mind that opens and closes those chakras. And it's the body intellect that opens and closes the mind. And that brings us to today. Today, we want to understand a little bit more about chakras. Everyone in New Ageyville talks about chakras and whether they're open and closed and stuff like that. But we want to get a lot more basic, because it's just possible that those people don't know what they're talking about. We don't want to fall into that trap. If we want to go around opening things and closing things, it behooves us to know what we're opening and closing, don't you think? Opening chakras, by the way, is not the goal. It's just a way to get there. Great saints who have never heard of a chakra did just fine in their spiritual, emotional, physical, intellectual evolution. It's important to keep that in mind. But those great saints did find some way, some model to use, some mechanism for moving invisible yet very real energy through their physical selves. The model we're using to understand these things is the old Vedanta model, or To put it more simply, it's a chakra model. And that's what our show's about today, beginning to understand what these things called chakras really are, and what they have to do with your health, growth, self-improvement, happiness, and the realization of your full potential, your true self. That's the goal. Over the next number of shows, we'll describe chakras in very practical and very tangible ways. Eventually, we're going to isolate them and explain them in detail one by one. And while that's a worthwhile thing to do, it also means that to some degree, to a pretty large degree really, we're going to have to categorize and classify. And we warn against that around here, don't we? It's dangerous territory. Please keep in mind that if we are not careful, this textbook knowledge, this analytical knowledge of your chakras and their responsibilities will take you away from your goal rather than towards it. All right, so that's where we're headed today. But first, let's everybody take a moment because we have a second to take a deep breath, relax for a second. You can close your eyes if you're in a place where that's possible because we're going to take our virtual field trip, our journey in our mind's eye. And today, we're going to visualize that we've gotten ourselves a job as electricians of sorts. And our assignment is to inspect some electrical wires. So we look at two of them and we're told that one of them is a live wire and one of them is a dead one. Note those two terms, by the way. Our assignment is to tell which is which. So you study them for a few minutes and then you comment to me that you think that they're both dead. Since you know that life is rhythm and pulse and frequency and vibration, and both of them seem to be sitting still, there doesn't seem to be any activity going on at all. Now you know, because you've been watching Energy Contact, that invisible things are very real, but at this moment in this wiring room, you can't really relate to that concept because we're looking at physical things. And so at a moment when I'm looking away, you decide to walk up to these wires for the purpose of picking them up. Now I turn around and see you, and just immediately I leap on you. I tackle you. And at that moment, you're not very happy with me. Why should you be? I just knocked you down. But what I do after that is I take a rag and I dip it in some water and I throw it on that wire you were about to pick up. And just immediately it flashes and sparks and catches fire and boom, it's ashes like that. Okay, let's put a little epilogue on our field trip today. Later, you're driving home and you're thinking about that electricity that would have killed you. And you think, what an evil thing to do. That electricity is bad stuff. And about that time you get home, you walk in your front door, you turn on the lights, you turn on the stereo, you put a snack in the toaster oven, you turn on your computer. Hold that thought. We know that to be healthy, we have to move energy. The stuff you can see, the stuff you cannot see through the body, the stuff you can see. But that's very abstract, and it brings us back to science class. Let's put up a slide. Every math and science student learns this saying: all models are wrong. Some models are useful. So scientific models and mathematical models are not supposed to be photorealistic. They just provide us a pedagogy, a learning tool, a structure. As long as the model keeps working for us, we'll keep using it. Let's come back up here. If this is the case in the math and the science world, it's also the case in the energetic invisible world, huh? We're about to look at some pictures of things called chakras and nadis and stuff like that. But remember, you can't see these things. You can't draw these things. A surgeon can cut you open and look around all day long, all week long, and he will not find a chakra. Not even one. Chakras are invisible. They're like electricity, like cell phone signals. But they're very real. And you happen to have hundreds of these chakras. Maybe you heard somewhere there were only 7. We'll come back and explain that too. But just like this invisible but very real electricity flows through wires and pipes, invisible energy has to flow through your physical structure too. And what does it flow through? Well, it flows through these things called nadis. And that brings us back to our story of Shakti. Remember her? Shakti's story is a yogic parable of how energy flows in our body. Now Shakti, as the story goes, has this boyfriend named Shiva. And she wants to see him. She wants to be reunited with him very, very badly. But she is very, very far away from him. And so in order to find him, in order to be reunited, she has to go on a journey. And that journey takes her through a pathway, through channels, through pipelines. And in order to complete it, she's going to have to figure out how to get past obstacles and to open up gates and to get through them. But there's another problem. She has to transcend some things that feel very real, but they're not real. And she has to see some things that are very real, but they're invisible. To understand chakras, we have to understand Shakti's story a little bit. And we have to understand something about Kundalini Shakti. They even named this energy after her. And we have to understand the wiring through which this Kundalini travels. And that brings us to our Sushumna Nadi. Let's bring up that slide. The Sushumna Nadi is a pipe. That thing on the right of your screen there, it's that skinny little pipe right in the middle of that. That is Shakti's path. It's the path through which Kundalini must travel and upon which is located 6 of the 7 main chakras. The 7th one's right above it. And it functions a little like that medical thing. That medical thing there is called a caduceus. We're going to come right back to that. And it runs along a path, as you'll see, that is roughly the same as your spine. That's what that spine's doing on your screen there. Those little circles, the circles around the Sushumna Nadi and the little dots on the caduceus there, those are the chakras. Now, opening up those chakras is a very good idea, but it's not the goal. We're only doing that so that we can move energy, chi, prana, Kundalini Shakti, move that stuff unimpeded up the Sushumna. But even that's not the goal. It's the means to another goal. Let's come back here. All of us, in a metaphoric but a very real way, want to get the Shakti in us to wake up and break out of that cage that is her pelvis and rise up the Sushumna and be reunited with Shiva up here somewhere. But those things called chakras, they're in the way. They're closing up the Sushumna Nadi, and they're closing up a bunch of other nadis too. And that's what we want to understand. First, before we go off to there, let's come back to nadis for a second. We should explain that term a little better. The term nadi just means energy channel. So you can think of a nadi as being like a blood vessel. See my buddy Cool Chi guy here? He's an acupuncture model. So probably more accurately, you can think of nadis as being like his little meridians, the pipes through which that acupuncture energy flows. But just for the sake of being tangible, something you can relate to a little better, let's go back to the blood vessel story. You can think of big nadis being like big blood vessels and little nadis being like little blood vessels. The tiny ones being like little capillaries, things like that. You have all sorts of nadis. You got big ones, little ones, long ones, short ones, nadis inside nadis, nadis wrapped around other nadis. They're all over the place. According to the old mystics, you have about 72,000 nadis. Now that sounds like a lot, but according to science texts, you have upwards of 100,000 kilometers of blood vessels in your body. That's enough, according to those books, to stretch around the equator of the Earth 2.5 times. So in comparison, 72,000 seems pretty realistic, doesn't it? Those old guys 10,000 years ago were smarter than a lot of people think. Just like most of the blood vessels in us are tiny little capillaries, little things too microscopic for most people to think they amount to anything. Well, most of our nadis are that way too. The Sushumna Nadi is the biggest of them. It's sort of the aorta of the nadis, if you will. And there's another two, called the Ida and the Pingala, that wrap around it, sort of like snakes do. Those were the snakes you saw on your slide a moment ago, and we're going to come right back to that slide in a minute. But first, let's reset our focus about energy flows, so we can get to that and what it has to do with chakras and Kundalini Shakti. Blood flows through your blood vessels, through your veins and arteries, and blood carries energy. Chi flows through Cool Chi Guy's meridians, and yours and mine too. And chi is energy. Prana flows through nadis, and Kundalini Shakti. And those words are just words for energy. It's all the same, all different words from different cultures to depict the exact same things. Phew. Now the only reason that the ancients were interested in chakras at all is because they were concerned with promoting the flow of Kundalini Shakti. It's this mystical energy, this earthy energy that rises up from the earth. So let's bring up our slide again and talk about Kundalini a little bit. Kundalini implies, the word implies snake, but it's not literally the way it translates. Literally, Kundala means coiled, as a snake would be coiled. And the suffix ini gives its feminine gender. We'll find out that that's important in a few shows. The yogis believed that these two snake-like paths intertwine their way up our spines, and those are the Ida and the Pingala. You can see them very easy on that medical symbol there. That's what they represent. But if you look, you can see those two paths on our Sushumna Nadi on the other side of your screen too. Well, that's how energy falls up. From earth to heaven, it crisscrosses like that. And Kundalini energy is that earthy, very sensual, snake-like energy that flows through that Sushumna and through the Ida and the Pingala. At least that's what it would be doing if those clogged up chakras weren't in the way. Phew, all right, let's come back up here. So, let's go from there to that live wire we saw on our field trip. You couldn't see it pulsating and vibrating in a snake-like fashion. But that's what it was doing. It has to have been, because that's how energy works. Ask any physics professors. Those old mystics weren't physics professors, but they figured it out without a whole lot of microscopes to help them. That's how Kundalini Shakti works, exactly like electricity. But let's get from here to chakras, and let's learn a little more vocabulary. The word chakra literally translates from the Sanskrit as wheel, and they do seem to be round, sort of, most of them, and they do kind of spin. And they have a pulse and a rhythm and a vibration and all their own. We'll see soon that they have sounds associated with them, that they have colors associated with them, each their own. Now, a lot of people who have a fleeting interest or a familiarity with chakras are introduced to them as these wonderful things. We make little pendants and jewelry pieces out of them. And they can be wonderful things, but in their present condition, they're not wonderful at all. They're not the solution, they're the problem. All right, and we've got hundreds of them, hundreds of these chakras. If the nadis are like Cool Chi Guy's meridians, then the chakras are like the acupuncture points themselves. The acupuncturist calls those little points tsubo, by the way. And they're the little points that if you've ever gotten acupuncture, the needles go in. Those aren't random points. They're well mapped out. But most people, when they talk about chakras, are not talking about the hundreds and hundreds. They're talking about the 7 big ones. And at least for the time being, so are we. Let's look at some more pictures. Let's bring up our next slide. First off, what is it about the 7 big chakras, if we've got hundreds of them, what is it about the 7 big ones that make them big? Well, they are the chakras that lie along the Sushumna Nadi, or at least 6 of them are anyway. And they are the nadis through which the Ida and Pingala travel. We don't have Idas and Pingalas on your screen right now. And so these 7 chakras, these 7 big ones, are the ones we have to negotiate if we want to move Kundalini Shakti upwards. On this slide, you can see how a few different artists over the centuries have depicted chakras. Remember, you can't draw them. They're invisible. You can only represent them schematically. And, by the way, how can non-physical things be big or small or round or spinning, things like that? We'll come back to that too. But for now, we can think if we take care of these 7 big chakras, all the little chakras will start to take care of themselves. And to some extent, for where we are now, that's pretty much the case. Let's move forward to our next slide. And now you'll start to see where those chakras are located in your body. You'll notice the chakras in our little dude there, they're represented by those springy things. And you'll notice you got the 5 in the middle that go out horizontally. They have a front and the back. The bottom one, that's the one they call the first one, and the top one, they don't have a front and a back. In a way, they're sort of like the front and the back of each other. We'll come back to that too. Want to see a little more? Let's go to our next slide. Here are some more representations of people in their chakras. Here you can see the Sushumna and the Ida and the Pingala represented in some of those pictures too. All of them. And here, especially in that middle picture, you can begin to visualize the chakras as the skeletons of the aura. Well, that's a loaded statement, and we'll come back to that on a previous show. Okay, let's come back here. And let's go back to Shakti for a moment. As Shakti moves upward on her journey, Every time she encounters a new block, every time she comes across something that she either cannot or will not deal with, every time she has an issue, she puts up boundaries, she separates, she resists flow, and she experiences that as pain, as suffering. And the suffering continues as long as the separation does, until and unless she figures out what the resistance is and what to do about it. That's very important to understand. I hope you can see that, because in this story, Shakti is you. Since there's no difference between the body and the mind and the spirit and the emotion and all those things, her energetic resistance to flow immediately translates into physical things and into emotional things. And that makes her and you sicker, sadder, uglier, things like that, angrier, you name it. But when Shakti learns to flow with everything, nothing can ever hurt her ever again. And the same goes for you. And at that point, her chakras and your chakras are wide open. Somewhere in the message of all of that is the key to your physical health and appearance, to why you look the way you look, why you act the way you act, why you hate the things you hate, hurt the way you hurt, love the things you love, think the way you think, and feel the way you feel. And oh my goodness, now we've arrived at the goal. Health, happiness, growth, self-improvement, and the realization of your full potential. The realization of your true self. Your body, your health, your mood is all just a projection of how well or how poorly you promote the flow of that invisible energy through your physical self. Your chakras just represent the boundaries you put up to block that stuff and what you do to open it. And we're going to be looking at that a lot. And that brings us to where we started off today. The better you flow energy through your physical self, the healthier and happier and the better looking and all those other things you'll be. You've got to move the stuff you can't see, this energy, through the stuff you can see. Remember, there's no difference. Like ice and water and steam, they look different. Our senses perceive them differently, but they're exactly the same. The same water that gives life to a person thirsting in the desert is the same water that gives death to a drowning man. There's no volition, there's no will. That's just the way it goes. It's where you find yourself in relationship to it. And that's where we're going to pick up next time. Thank you for joining me today. I wish you peace and positive energy and a healthy life in Energy Contact.
I'm gonna drive